Hi everyone, my name is Dee and I'm here with Tracy.
Hi, hello.
And we are We Knew the Moon. We have created this little Empath Miniseries in the run-up to season 2 of our podcast, our We Knew the Moon podcast. And the first episode in this miniseries is actually a bit of a throwback, a blast from the past, going all the way back to 2019 when I had the honor and the privilege of interviewing Judith Orloff. She is the empath goddess, isn't she, Tracy?
Oh, love Judith. Really recommend her books as well.
Exactly. When I first read the Empath Survival Guide, it was like getting a diagnosis and finally being able to have the key to understand myself so much better. So that book I definitely recommend if you think you might be an empath, if you know you're an empath and you're struggling. Now I'm going to let you listen to this interview from 2019. Your books, Thriving as an Empath and an Empath Empowerment Journal, they're really unique. I've not seen anything like them on the market. Can you tell me how the ideas for them came about?
Well, I'm an empath and I'm also a psychiatrist in Los Angeles. And so I combine my traditional medical skills with also being an empath. And an empath is an emotional sponge who tends to sense and absorb and be open to emotions, physical sensations, nature. And so there's many beautiful things about being an empath, and there are many challenging things about being an empath, such as absorbing other people's stress. And so I wanted to write Thriving as an Empath to give people daily self-care techniques to use. You empaths are the most beautiful people in the world, to me, can stay centered and strong and learn how to deal with the challenges of taking on other people's energy and other people's stress, and learn how to be very strong and yet open and vulnerable with your abilities. And the Empath Empowerment Journal is a workbook so that you could begin to write about your most intimate empath needs and have fun with the journal. It's playful, to be able to know yourself better, have a private, safe place to express yourself. And you could read a section in Thriving as an Empath, such as today, the selection is feeling things intensely and what that's like to feel things intensely. And then you can go to the journal and write about it. So it's about learning and healing, using both of those products together.
I absolutely love today's message about feeling things intensely and passionately, as you said, because I feel like as an empath, quite often we're accused of being oversensitive or feeling too much. And it's taken me, for example, a while to learn, and a lot of reading of your materials in particular, that it's not me being too much, that maybe the people I'm surrounding myself who find me too much are too little. And like I said, that message today really resonated.
Right, exactly. And I know I've been accused throughout my life of being too much or too intense or, too this or too that, too sensitive. And, that was always a fear I had being an empath, getting into a relationship, that I'm just, quote, too much for anyone to handle. Because empaths do have a lot of feelings, a lot of things come up. So we're rich and multifaceted, emotional and spiritual and intuitive people. That is true. However, it's not too much. It's who we are. And it's true, you have to learn how to ground yourself so your energy isn't oozing out all the time. You want to ground yourself. You want to be able to come from your heart, come from your center, and, really begin to find that sense of balance. But you're not too much. And that's what today's entry is, that you want to feel things intensely. You want to look at the little butterfly on the flower and feel like you know her.
And I think what you said about relationships really ties in nicely with what I think is one of my favorite pages in the Empath Empowerment Journal. And that's the page where you write marriage wedding vows to yourself.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important, isn't it, to really understand yourself and what you need, and you owe it to yourself as well as your partner to be able to have that self-awareness.
Yes, there's a day devoted to marrying yourself. I had a dream many, many, many years ago where I married myself, and I began to feel the power of that, what that means. I mean, you could be in a relationship with somebody and love them madly and be in a real relationship, but you have to be married to yourself first. If you're not, then you don't have anything to give, really. You give yourself, you give your heart, you give your devotion, you give your commitment to explore life together, but you have to connect to yourself first. So yes, I believe in marrying ourselves. I think that's a really important ritual.
I think that it's amazing that these books really help with finding that self-awareness and giving yourself that time to do some exploration of the self. And the empowerment journal in particular, the way I love to use it, and I'm sure everyone has different ways, but for me, it's something I do when I finish my workday. It's sort of my way of switching off from work and just focusing on myself a little bit. And I absolutely love it for that.
Oh, that's beautiful that you do it when you come home from work.
It's one of the first things I do when I come in. I'll normally make myself a nice cup of tea and sit and do one of the exercises. And it's my way of switching off from the work side, which, as you know, working for yourself, it can take up every hour of every day if you're not careful.
Yes, that's true. And empaths give so much. You know, the passion is so great. They give so much of themselves, which is a positive. But I love that you work with the journal when you come back from work, and, you know, that's your transition activity.
Exactly. Transition. That's a great word. So the people listening to this podcast, my regular listeners and the people that have tuned in to listen to you, probably already identify as an empath or have an interest on the topic. So how would you say specifically that being an empath can affect your work life?
Empaths have particular needs. They're very creative. They're very free thinkers. They're very quirky, you know, and they need space around them, you know, which is essential. If they're too crowded, then they feel, you know, like their energy is being sapped oftentimes. And so depending on what kind of work you do, there's a chapter in the Empath Survival Guide, which is my first book on empaths, about empaths and work. What kind of jobs are best for empaths? What kind of situations are best for empaths in a job? They're energy vampires in the workplace, people who can sap you dry. And so there are all kinds of complainers, drama queens, narcissists, chronic talkers, gum snappers, all kinds of things. Empaths are very sensitive to noises that are in their environment. And if it's coarse and harsh and abrasive, it can take a toll. Or if empaths don't know how to set boundaries in the workplace, that can take a toll. So one of the self-care techniques in thriving as an empath is learning how to set clear boundaries everywhere, but you know, particularly at work. Like if you have a drama queen who's sitting next to you and he or she keeps coming up to you and telling you, oh, these long, dramatic stories, you know, and taking up all your time and sucking your energy all the while they're doing it. You know, you have to learn how to say, you know, I'm so sorry this is happening to you. I wish you well, and I need to get back to my project. So you don't encourage it. You don't look into their eyes. You don't say, oh, tell me more. So you set that boundary for yourself, and then all of a sudden you have a lot more energy.
I totally relate to that because I remember one of my first jobs. I remember coming home to my parents every day and just being really torn apart because I used to sit behind these two ladies and they used to talk to each other constantly. And right. My dad described it as, there's an expression in French, pissing vinegar. You know, when someone's so bitter and twisted and these two ladies would just sit and make judgments and just really, really negative. They weren't even talking to me, but that's all I heard all day long. And I wasn't in a position where I could put in headphones or move. And it really just sapped my energy. Like you say, it can be draining, can't it?
It can be very draining, but oftentimes the empaths I work with in my practice talk themselves out of it. They say, oh, it's just me. No, I should be able to fill in the blank. Mm-hmm. And that's not the proper way to look at it as an empath. You have sensitivities. You might be more sensitive than other people around you. And that's true because you have more depth and you read energy. Empaths read energy and they're sensitive to energy. Whereas, I introduced you to my partner. I love him madly and he is just not that sensitive to energy. I mean, he's not an empath. He's a rock, a different type of configuration of human being, which I love because empaths feel a lot in the workplace and elsewhere. So it helps me in a relationship to have somebody who's really solid and not feeling as much as I am.
To level you out, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Do you think that that's perhaps why working for yourself, being an entrepreneur, being a freelancer, however you describe yourself, that might be better suited to empaths? Because I find that at least a lot of the people that approach me for business management, consultancy, etc., they're empaths. They're my target audience. But that's because I am one. And the reason I am an entrepreneur is because of my empath ways and difficulties working in workplaces and for other people. But do you think that as an empath, you're better suited to working for yourself because you have more control over your boundaries and who you work with?
I definitely do. As long as you don't become isolated. Because some of my empath patients who have businesses at home tend to become isolated and they get lonely. So it's a balance. If you don't have a partner, if you don't have a family and you're working on your own business, it's good to, especially good to have nurturing contacts outside of the home as well. I wouldn't like to work for anybody else. And thankfully, I'm not in a position where I have to. No, I like being in control of my own destiny or, with higher power, with spirit. But I wouldn't like going into an office because I don't like noise at all. And so I particularly treasure the quiet of my house. If I'm writing, let's say, or if I'm giving a workshop, it's not noisy. And so the noise level as an empath is very important to me. And I also like my alone time. And if you're in an office environment or a busy environment, you don't get that much alone time. However, I do want to say, I know a lot of extroverted empaths who love high-powered environments, social situations. So if you're an extroverted empath versus an introverted empath, you might want to get out there a little bit more because it won't be stimulating enough for you to be at home.
You said, particularly people without partners or family who work from home might get isolated. But I find like even if you do have partners, friends, etc., it's really helpful to be in touch with other entrepreneurs or self-employed people, again, however you identify, but in particular, other empath entrepreneurs. It's really handy to sort of swap tips and tricks, but also to have that sense of solidarity and companionship is always handy, isn't it?
Oh, it's so important to have the kindred spirits and empath entrepreneurs. When they're together like that, you can support each other in your endeavors. And in some of the problems that come up with dealing with, other coworkers and, how do you deal with it as an empath? It's very different because you feel things. How do you set a boundary at work? How do you ask for your needs to be met? How do you go forward with a project that maybe is scary to you, but you still want to do it? There are all kinds of issues that come up.
It helps build up your confidence when you have people telling you like, no, you are doing the right thing. No, that's not you being unreasonable.
Exactly. That's why I still believe in empath support groups. And in our empath support group on Facebook, it's so wonderful just to have other people that you can talk to, who get you. Sometimes people who don't understand empaths don't get it. They don't understand your basic needs. But when you find your own kind, who get you, then it's so much easier, to get the kind of support that you need.
I absolutely love your Facebook group. I'm a very active member. I find it super useful because, like you said, people who aren't empaths don't get it. They just think, well, aren't you just oversensitive? And realistically, a lot of people are not going to read a book like your survival guide, empath survival guide, if they don't identify themselves as an empath, unless they really love you and they really want to understand you. So your group is amazing because you post short articles on different topics to do with being an empath. There's the occasional meme and little quote that I quite often, for example, share with my partner, with my family members, with other people I have to interact with, because they explain me much better than I can.
Right. Right. And I'm a big believer in educating loved ones and coworkers because sometimes they don't understand. Non-empaths can be gorgeous, are gorgeous human beings, but they just don't get it. And so, I have also an online course for empaths that I recommend that they might want to look at the video course and just learn about your loved one. It's like getting schooled, in you. Exactly. Now, people who love you need to be schooled in you if you're an empath. And so there are ways of doing that. So it just doesn't seem so foreign and weird to them. It's like okay, now I know what to do to love you better. And,
I have to say, I called your book my Bible earlier, but I really mean it. It was one of my most life-changing books that I've ever read because it wasn't the first time I'd heard this word empath, but it was like reading a diagnosis of myself. And I don't like the word diagnosis because that implies something negative, but I can't think of another word. It just all fell into place and it all made sense. And once I got a name for it, I was able to research how to sort of protect myself around it so that it became more of a blessing rather than a curse, which I know is an ongoing conversation, isn't it, with empaths? Is it a blessing? Is it a curse? But I truly believe it's a blessing as long as you can protect yourself from the pitfalls of it.
Right. And as long as you don't think you're crazy, because the mental health system will make you think you're crazy. And a lot of times empaths in the U.S. get medicated, and then, they get sent to me to second opinion to evaluate them. And empaths, are often on sensory overload for years when they're not diagnosed as empaths. But once they are, they can learn how to decrease their stimulation level and thus decrease their anxiety and depression. So there's a whole different way of dealing with empaths for me as a psychiatrist versus the traditional medical model. You see, and that's really, really important to know. Many psychiatrists will say that you're crazy or you're hypochondriac or you're a malingerer or all these things you're not. In the Empath Survival Guide, for those who are listening, there's a 20-question self-assessment test to find out how much of an empath you are. So you can always take that or give it to friends so that they can have an idea of who and what they are. It's a particular type of person. And if you are one, like we are, really helps to know about it.
It's amazing because before that, having been constantly told that I was oversensitive, it really dented my confidence. I really felt like there's something wrong with me. I am oversensitive. I overreact. The problems are always with me. I'm creating problems where there aren't problems. And once I found out what it was, it just helped so much. So I have to thank you for that because that was life-changing. And if your listeners out there haven't read the Empath Survival Guide, I 100% recommend it. But we talked a little bit about protecting yourself against the pitfalls. Do you have any suggestions for empaths about what they can do to protect themselves?
Well, the first thing, in terms of your ideas and your creative abilities, you want to support that as much as possible and not censor yourself. You want to just let your ideas flow freely in terms of what your dreams are about your business. You don't want to stop yourself. All right, so that's really important. You want to use your sensitivities and your intuition to go forth in your business ventures. You really want to tap into that and not second guess yourself. And then in terms of
something where the journal could really help with exploring what's going on in your mind.
Oh yeah, the journal can help with this so you can remove blocks to your creativity. You want to dream big. You want to dream whatever your goals are or your whims or your creative impulses. You want to follow them. And many empaths might put a little cap on them, and you don't want to do that. You want to just let it flow, and you can write about your dreams in your journal, tune into your intuition, find out which ones are practical and doable. But you want that whole process to be going on all the time, that creative process. So it's important to have quiet when you're in your creative workspace.
The entrepreneurs I work with, being empaths, they genuinely care so much for their clients, their customers, the people that they work with, the people they hire. And a lot of them come to me with compassion fatigue. They're struggling with that boundary of how much is expected of them and how much should they be doing. Do you have any tips on how to sort of prevent compassion burnout?
Yeah, because empaths tend to be over-helpers and over-givers. And I remember when I first started my psychiatric practice, I did that, and I had a huge practice. People called me at all hours of the day and night. And I remember I just flopped on the bed one day and thought, I can't do this. This is too much. It was just exhausting. And so, empaths need to learn how to set boundaries because you can't be a martyr. I understand your desire to give, but it's always a balancing act, being an empath. You have to have time for recreation and getting out in nature. You need to have personal time with spirit and nature. Otherwise, you won't be good for anyone. You want to have longevity as an empath entrepreneur. You want to be able to help people, but you won't be able to do that if you give all the time. You'll just eventually burn yourself out. And I've seen it happen so many times. It's a skill set. And so sometimes you need to learn the skill set so you don't burn out. But everyone listening, you don't want to give nonstop. And I know that might hurt your heart because you're such givers and you love giving. But you need to give to yourself. What we were talking about, getting married to yourself earlier on.
Yeah.
That vow is sacred. That includes working with others, and you just cannot keep working as an empath all the time and not burn out.
No, you need to give from the overflow, don't you? Otherwise, you'll just get depleted. Ideally, you want to set these boundaries right from the start of your relationship with a new customer, a new client. But if you haven't done that, it's totally okay, isn't it, to reestablish different boundaries if something's not working for you?
Oh, always, because as an empath, I'm always listening to my body, who feels good around, who I'm around, who doesn't, what boundaries feel good. It's constant reassessment. You can't just have a rule and follow it for the rest of your life. It doesn't work that way as an empath because we're so fluid and we're changing. And I might make a plan one day to go out, and then the day comes and I'm just too tired to do it, so I have to cancel it.
Yeah.
You've got to flow with what's going on for yourself. You can't just rigidly do things as an empath. We're very water-like and fluid, and you never know how you're going to feel. So you want to honor how you feel and honor your commitments to other people too, but find that balance when, it's not possible, when it's just, you don't want to push beyond your red line. If you don't have to, sometimes you have to, but you don't have to, don't do it.
You can avoid it, right? Yeah, and I always like to remind myself, no is a full sentence. So you also talk in the survival guide and on different videos and so forth about the link between being an empath and masking your emotions through addiction, but also the link between being an empath and certain illnesses. And in particular, the one that interested me was adrenal fatigue. Is there anything that you recommend in terms of protecting yourself against this?
Yes, empaths get what I call in the book empathic illnesses, where you're picking up the stress from other people around you. Or you're picking up even the physical symptoms. And if you're on chronic sensory overload, you're prone to autoimmune disorders, chronic adrenal fatigue. Your body will burn out. The key is to assess, am I on sensory overload at this moment, and how can I decrease it? And you want to ask yourself every day how you can not be overstimulated or go on sensory overload. And that means the self-care techniques that I'm talking about in Thriving as an Empath. It means learning how to take some alone time.
Yeah.
It means learning how to meditate. It means taking a bath or immersing yourself in moonlight, in the water, which I do every night. I have a bathtub where I actually can see the moonlight coming through in the water.
That sounds amazing.
But yes, and it so replenishes me. So find your own way. What replenishes you so that you don't burn out. As an empath entrepreneur, you want to have good energy. You want to have joy, and you don't want to burn out. And so it's a constant balance of how do I set boundaries? How do I let my creativity flow? How do I find positive people? It's a constant dance of self-care.
I have a couple of hypothetical questions for you now. But they're actually ones I've come across many a time in different forms. And I just wanted to get your take on it and your advice for these hypothetical / slightly real people. So imagine you're self-employed. For example, you have finally opened up your dream shop. And most of the people that are attracted to your shop are kind of like-minded because of the nature of your stock and your personality and your branding. But unfortunately, it being a shop, you can't have control over who comes into it. And every now and then you get psychic vampires or toxic people or very negative people, and it leaves you shaken because, they're in your space and there's not much you can do about it, short of asking them to leave, which feels unreasonable when they haven't really done anything technically wrong. What advice would you give to that empath, that little empath shop owner?
Yeah, the little empath shop owner, bless your heart. I love your shop. I wouldn't encourage the person. I wouldn't look deep into their eyes. I wouldn't ask if you could help them. I wouldn't have body posture and body language that welcomes them. I would maybe put up a protective shield, a bubble around yourself while they're in there, and just not encourage their energy. There's a lot you can do to not encourage their energy. And then also what I do, in my office before patients come in is I do a heart-centered meditation, when I'm just there, so I can open up my heart and the heart energy can fill the room. And that often relaxes people, even if they're in a bad mood or they're negative, it helps them to relax a little if you can do that in your empath shop.
That sounds Absolutely amazing. I will definitely pass that on to hypothetical Tracy, the shop owner.
Yes, I love the shops. Tell them I love the shops.
Actually, Tracy, she won't mind me saying that is genuinely my friend who owns a shop, and she's fantastic. And she did the first podcast episode with me on being an empath entrepreneur. And me and her were kind of our little mini empath support group. And like we were talking before, it's so helpful, isn't it, to find someone who understands you. Like me and her, we regularly talk about having the empath shit. And she gets it too, you know, when we're so worked up that it affects us physically.
And it does affect you, but she might also put some kind of a sacred object in the doorway or a Kuan Yin statue to set the energy for her shop. You know, some kind of sacred object or something hanging in the doorway that sets the energy for the shop as well.
And I presume that would work for any kind of workspace as well.
It would.
Fantastic. What would you say to those people, you know, living in London, this is a massive problem, who have their dream job or their dream business, but the commute is a nightmare. I used to have this problem. I actually left a job that I absolutely loved because it was 3 hours a day in just too close proximity with too many people on the train in rush hour, people breathing on me, feeling all their negativity, and I would be exhausted emotionally and physically before I even got to work. And I had to leave that job for that main reason. How can you combat that stress of the commute?
If you have to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you have to do it, then you need to sit in your own space, even if there's only an inch or two from, the other person. And you need to focus on your heart energy and need to focus on what's in your own mind and stay in your own bubble. That's the key to getting through. It's not to focus on what other people are doing. And it's really a meditation activity to be able to stay centered in the midst of chaos. So you can look at it as a meditation opportunity.
I used to try to imagine myself in bubble wrap. And a friend of mine recently told me a little trick of imagining yourself, wrapping yourself up in the sort of Harry Potter type of cloak and protecting yourself in that.
Yes, cloak of invisibility.
Amazing, yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to thank you so much, Judith, for joining me today. It's been such an honor, such a pleasure to be speaking to you.
Oh, you're very welcome.
If you enjoyed that and you want more from us, why don't you head over to our Patreon page, patreon.com/We Knew the Moon, and check out some bonus content.
Also, if you want to stay up to date, you can follow us on our Facebook page at we.knew.the.moon. If you could leave us a review on our Facebook page, that would mean a lot.
Our Instagram handle is the same as our Facebook, at we.knew.the.moon. We are on Twitter at We Knew the Moon 1, and we are also on Pinterest. Just search for We Knew the Moon.
Finally, if you want lots more fun, moon info, and all things spiritual, plus our lovely shop, please visit our website, wenewthemoon.co.uk.